From the 23rd of January, when we first entrenched ourselves at Eshowe, we were as men cut off from the world. The rain fell without ceasing for weeks. The air was heavy with damp and fever, and our food, already scant, grew mouldy in the barrels. Each day we looked to the hills expecting relief, but none came, and the Zulus were ever near, watching, waiting. They would show themselves at dawn, black figures moving among the tall grass and mimosa, sometimes advancing in small parties to within rifle range, only to melt back into the bush. We worked day and night, strengthening the defences, ditches, parapets, and thorn barricades. The mission buildings we loopholed and fortified, turning the chapel into a hospital. There was little to eat save biscuit and salt meat, and for water we relied on the rain collected from the roofs. Disease began to take its toll. Men grew weak with dysentery and fever, and our supplies of quinine and medical stores ran dangerously low. We could see the vultures circling daily above the surrounding plain, a grim reminder of the fallen left beyond our lines. On one occasion, the Zulus attempted to storm us under cover of mist, their war cries echoing through the valley. But our rifles and the Gatling gun drove them off. Afterwards, all was silent, save for the moaning of the wounded. The worst was not knowing. No news had reached us from the outside world since the disaster at Isandlwana. We imagined that the entire colony had fallen. It was a strange, haunting existence, each sunrise bringing hope of relief, each sunset a return to despair. At last, after 10 long weeks, the booming of guns was heard far off. We climbed to the parapets and listened in breathless silence. The relief column was fighting its way toward us. The sound came nearer each day, until on the 3rd of April, we saw the flash of British artillery upon the hills. When Colonel Crealock's men entered the fort, cheer after cheer rang through the camp. Our besiegers had vanished into the bush. We were worn to ghosts, gaunt, hollow-eyed, and fevered, but free at last. Eshowe had held.
When we first came up to Eshowe after the fight at Inyazan, we thought we'd be pushing on deeper into Zululand. But word came of the great defeat at Isandlwana, and everything changed. Colonel Pearson said we must hold fast, so we began to fortify the mission station. The Zulus were all around us, though we seldom saw more than a few at a time. The air was thick and damp, and there was never a dry patch to sit on. The rain poured for days. Our clothes were never dry. The biscuit we were given went green with mould, and the salt meat was crawling with maggots before we got it to the pot. Still, we ate what we could. Many of the lads grew sick, bad bowels and fevers. The hospital huts were full, and we buried men almost every day. We had to fetch water from holes we dug in the ground to catch the rain, and sometimes from a little spring just outside the lines, always under watch for the Zulus. The natives would sometimes shout from the bush, mocking us. At night we could see their fires on the hills. We'd turn out at first light and stand to in case of attack. Everyone was thin and pale by March. We'd run short of tea, sugar, and almost all comforts. We made a sort of coffee from burnt biscuit crumbs. The worst of it was the waiting, never knowing if we'd be relieved or cut to pieces. Once we heard firing far off and thought our time had come, but it faded again. It was not until April that we heard the guns for certain. That night no one slept for excitement. When the relief column finally marched in, the band played God Save the Queen, and many of us wept outright. The Zulus had gone, leaving only their campfires smouldering. We were weak and worn to the bone, but proud we'd held out. Eshowe had been a prison, but it was now a name to be remembered.
The position of the sick and wounded during our confinement at Eshowe was deplorable in the extreme. The mission house, which we converted into a hospital, was ill-suited to our needs, the roof leaking incessantly and the air within heavy with damp. The floors were perpetually soaked, and the stench of wet clothing and fever never left us. When we first took post here, there were some 20 wounded from the fight at Eyewitness. But by February, the sick rolls had risen to over 100, chiefly from dysentery, ague, and rheumatism brought on by exposure. Quinine and medical comforts were exhausted early. We improvised poultices from meal, lint from torn bandages, and cots from biscuit boxes. There were days when I could do little more than ease their pain. We buried men in the sodden ground beyond the parapet, often under fire from distant Zulu skirmishers. At night, I could hear the jackals howling around the graves. The soldiers bore their sufferings with admirable patience. Even those fever-stricken beyond recovery seldom complained. Many times I was struck by the quiet heroism of the private soldier, who would share his ration of biscuit or tea with a comrade worse off. The rain, the insects, the smell of decay, these became our constant companions. Each day the walls seemed to close in a little more, and each night the same question returned. Would relief come in time? When the guns of Lord Chelmsford's column were first heard on the 2nd of April, a tremor of joy passed through the whole fort. Men too weak to stand crawled to the doors to listen. When the relief finally arrived, the effect was extraordinary. Those half dead with fever seemed to revive by sheer will. The siege cost us near 80 lives, more to disease than to battle. Yet not a man doubted that our endurance had served its purpose. Eshowe had held, and with it, the honour of Her Majesty's forces.
It is difficult to convey to those at home what life has been like within these walls since January. We are shut off completely, as though upon an island in the sea, with the enemy invisible yet ever near. Day and night we are on the watch, and the least movement in the bush brings every man to his post. The Zulus have shown themselves many times in the distance, creeping along the ridges or watching us from the tree line. Once they drove a herd of cattle toward our lines, hoping to draw us out, but we would not be tempted. They are cunning and patient, far more so than many in England would believe. The fort itself is a curious sight, church, mission house, and huts all loopholed for defence, with sandbags, wagons, and biscuit boxes piled into parapets. We have dug a ditch around the whole, and planted the ground with felled thorn trees so thick that no man could pass through it without impaling himself. The rain is incessant. We sleep in our damp uniforms, our boots never dry. Rations are meagre, salt meat and biscuit, sometimes mealies when the natives bring them in. The biscuits are blue with mould and as hard as iron. Tea and sugar long since ran out. We hear nothing from the outside world. Since the dreadful news of Eyewitness reached us, no word has come through. Many believe the colony itself may have been overrun. Still, the men's spirits remain surprisingly good. There has been a little grumbling, though much sickness. The hospital is full, fever and dysentery spare no one. The nights are the worst. The cries of the jackals and hyenas echo through the bush, and now and then a Zulu war song floats up faintly on the wind. Every shadow looks like a warrior moving, yet the discipline of the men is remarkable. Each day we mount the same watch, perform the same drills, and live by the same routine, as though we were in barracks. On the 2nd of April we heard gunfire from the north, dull and distant at first, then stronger, unmistakably the sound of British artillery. That night the camp scarcely slept. By the following afternoon, the advance guard of the relief column was in sight. The scene that followed was beyond description, men cheering, weeping, embracing one another. Lord Chelmsford himself rode in, mud-spattered and smiling, and for the first time in months we knew we were safe. We are little more than scarecrows now, thin and hollow-eyed, but proud to have held this place. The Zulus melted away before the relief arrived, and the Union Jack still flies above the mission house. Eshowe has cost us dearly, but it will be remembered.